Okay, before we move on with the seatbelt installation in our Factory 6, I thought you might find this interesting. I mentioned that it has an inner longitudinal stiffening kit, and much like the Ferrari car, you know, the Ferrari has the longitudinal part done, but it didn't have the inner firewall stiffener done yet. So I thought you might find this interesting. This is the piece. I got this from our friends at Mad Dog Motorsports. Great place for all kinds of 914 upgrades like this, chassis upgrades, etc. But this is a nicely cut, ready to fit. You can see what happens here is there's some pre-cut lines here. I'm going to move this out of the way to account for that slight angle. So this needs to be affixed. And I still have to trim it around the, you know, it's not expecting Ferrari shifter cables to go through the firewall there, so I got to make a couple modifications. But once this is in place, like, you know, clearance for the emergency brake cutouts, etc., then this piece gets pounded into shape. This piece gets tipped over and plug welded on. And when it arrived, I thought to myself, you know, what's a guy with a plasma table and CAD capabilities doing buying a piece of hardware like that? But when you do the math, the cost of purchasing something like this versus the time and materials, it actually pays off, because this is absolutely positively known to work, and it's essentially the one and done kind of a decision. So yep, I'm a big fan of, I can make parts, but I typically only do that when I have to. If I can buy something that's already done, why not take advantage of all that work that somebody else did? Economies of scale and all that. So anyway, let's get back to work on getting the seatbelts in the Factory 6. Okay, back in the car, we're almost ready to weld in the first retractor plate. And so what I did is I just drilled a little pilot hole for some self-tapping screws to suck this plate as tight against that as I can. You want to get those rosette welds, you want to have them as close to the parent material as possible. And then I just have some welding, actually a welding jacket that I'm draping over everything to keep things protected. And I think I'm going to give a go to TIG welding it just to keep the flying sparks to a minimum. So here we go. Another little tool whore plug. This is from Harbor Freight. These are super inexpensive. I think they're like 25 bucks or something, these little belt sanders. The trick is, use the, take the time to buy the 3M abrasives. And this thing is awesome. As you just saw, all I'm doing is just knocking down any high spots on those plug welds so that the seatbelt retractor components can sit flat against that plate. But I mean, virtually no sparking. It does a great job, super controllable, really inexpensive tool. But anyway, and then you saw me, if you paid super close attention, I faked like I was going to weld that up, knowing full well that was going to have to be drilled out to be the locating pin. You know, this locating pin, you know, keeps this thing from tipping out a vertical. But there we go. That's one done. And I'm not going to finish this. I'm going to let the owner, the guy that's helping him get the motor in, is also does paint work. So I suspect that they're going to take care of you know, any kind of finish work in here. But there's one down, and I'm just going to knock out the other one here later today. Probably won't cover that. It's just going to be the same. Drill a hole, get the plate fitted, and get it welded on. And then we'll get back on the oil cooler. So, new oil cooler time. Pull the old cooler out, and this is the new, I don't know, is it 25% larger? It's bigger. Slightly different configuration, but the difference this time is it's the owner's interested in having a set of fans. So he has purchased 3 5.5-inch Spall puller fans, and these will be mounted on the back, 1, 2, 3. I now have to get a fan mount worked out that goes on the back of the cooler. And this gives you an idea of how this is all going to work out. Now the difference is, the other cooler had nice big metal brackets that bolted directly to that little shroud, under shroud. This one is going to end up going together completely differently. It's got these threaded bosses. They're very shallow threaded bosses on the top and the bottom. So I have to make the fan shroud, or the fan mount. I think it's got to come up and connect to these and obviously be sealed against the back of the cooler. And then unfortunately, this lovely, lovely upholstered shroud, nice aluminum piece of work that was done by the guys that put the first cooler in, that's not going to work anymore. A, because it's not wide enough, and then it's also not tall enough, unfortunately. And I thought, oh, this is great. I can just, you know, kind of continue this angle out and make it wider, but it's not tall enough. So I haven't decided if I'm going to try to talk him into modifying this one, or if I'm going to tackle building a whole new shroud. I like the idea of modifying it because, not that it's that hard to do, but this has already got the nice mounts. It's already got a seal. You know, the fastener holes are already in the chassis. And it's not like it's impossible to match all that stuff. It's just, if I could make this work, it would be a bit of a time saver. And that's always a good thing. So, a little bit of progress just to start trying to figure out what's what. So here's the beginning of the CAD file for the fan brackets. And then after a little plasma table and brake action, we have the fan shroud, fan mount shroud. And what I did is, this little piece, I think as you saw, used to sit right here. And I'm calling this the under shroud. And I thought, well, wait a second, why don't I just incorporate that into the design? So this version 1 has this incorporated into the design. But as you guys know, I'm not great at the one and done thing. So this initial shroud was, I was planning on it being version 1, figuring, you know, I'd have some learnings from it, and this is one of them. You can see that these mounts are for the bosses on the cooler, and this mount would be what bolted it to the chassis. And after looking at it, when you put the cooler in here, this is hard to get to. So solving a couple of problems, if I set this back just a tick and move the holes forward to where they are in the chassis, they now clear the cooler can bolt on, and this can go in and out as a unit with the cooler in it when the fan's on it. So off to version 2. The new version 2 shroud, and what's nice about that is it bolts in right there, bolts to the chassis. It actually rests on, I don't know if you can see it, but these front suspension mount supports. It actually rests right on here, so I think I'm going to put a little bit of a rubber mount here and a little bit of a pad here just to keep it isolated a teeny bit. But that looks perfect. And it only took me 2 tries. World record. And then I'll use this little strip to ensure a seal at the front, and we should be good to go. So yay, mount done. Now I got to work out one last thing, and that is, but these fans are oddly shaped, or the mounts are oddly shaped. They mount in such a way, it's hard to position these things, but they mount in such a way that that top mount is proud of the fold at the top. So I made these little notches in here that I'll weld some little threaded inserts into, so those will just sit up there like that and bolt that right on there. So we should be good to go. Look. But here it is in, yeah. So now you can see the whole deal, right? The cooler bolts in, and with that whole assembly slid back, I just have those 2 bolts that run through and secure the whole thing. Now I think what I'm going to do too is, as I get the shroud in here, I'm gonna have the shroud come back to pick up that bolt, that same bolt hole. That'd be kind of cool. But if not, I may put a tab, add a tab to the front of this so I can secure that. So that'll also help. This isn't bolted down, by the way, which is why it's moving. But that'll just help stabilize the upper portion of this. So we'll see how that goes. But now this is far enough along that I can start working on that shroud. And ideally, it'll tie into the same holes that are there. And the old shroud had these holes at the front of the chassis, and I'm going to try to reuse those. It may be tricky because this is taller, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll just have to see where it goes. But I'll see what I can do. You thought it was only going to take 2 versions to get that cooler mount figured out, right? Who caught my stupid error? Who caught my absolutely stupid oversight? Any of you? Okay, so I went to all the trouble of the fancy schmancy adding this mount out the top because the fan, that one fan mount stuck up too high. And it did not even occur to me until today, right? After having this in the car and realizing I wanted to have this top surface be part of where the shroud went, and oh, I'm gonna have to put a spacer in here because these things are in the way. It never even occurred to me until this morning. Here's version 3. Just rotate the fans like 45 degrees so all the mounting points fit within the width of the, or the height of the cooler. Oh my God. Question everything. The reason, this is not even a reason, it's a horrible excuse. As near as I can tell, I was trying to get, I got the measurements, I got the drawing, the technical drawing of the fans with the measurements for where the mounting holes were and all the dimensions of all that, so I could make the, make the CAD drawing. And of course, that drawing, here's a picture of it, it has the fans oriented with that top mount pointed straight up. So without thinking, I put that directly into the CAD drawing without even considering rotating it. Question everything. Think more. Don't depend on the computers. But oh my God. So, throwaway piece. Oh, the other thing I did too, since I was going to do a redraw, it might be hard to see, but if I sort of set these next to each other, you can see that this piece was a 1/2 inch deep and it was inset relative to the width of the cooler. And I decided, well, okay, if the hood's going to come up on this, so to speak, I'm going to make this whole assembly wider and have this piece wrap around the end, which means that the shroud can butt right up against this, and I don't have to worry about, I don't know, it just made more sense to me. And I also widened it down here at the base because, yeah, that's not really going to make a difference, but, it's just tidier if it's the same width as the cooler. So, mo better. Question everything. Oh my God, what an idiot. Well, there you go. Live and learn. I hope, maybe that'll save somebody some time. But there it is, version 3, and it's very, very tidy. And now it's time to get back to shroud building. All right, actually, I think instead of getting started on the shroud in this episode, I'm going to save that for next time. And we're going to wrap this one up with all the great progress we made. Finally figuring out that if you take time to think a little bit and move something 45 degrees, you can make your life a whole lot simpler. So I hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. And as always, questions and comments down below. I really appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.